welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the BLON T3, which I think is actually a rename BL01 or 01. When the other 01 was announced, well actually slightly before that, this one was renamed the T3, and then the 1 became the 1. So a bit confusing, but this is the one that's been on sale for a little bit. It's the one without the removable cable, and it's using a dynamic driver, but not the CNT driver from the BL03, and not the new driver from the BL1 either. So it is, I think they call it biologic driver, which is sort of a cellulose paper driver. Not the fastest driver, kind of bassy, but the shell itself actually feels very, almost similar to the 03. It's got the same stubby 03 nozzle, but this hang down style is actually just more comfortable than the 03 was. This is a KZ star tip. The tips that come with it are, I don't know if they're slightly better than the 03, but they're approaching reasonable. I don't really use them because they're kind of too thin for my ears, but not bad. So this is a non-removable cable. It's this springy black kind of rubbery material. If you haven't heard microphonics in a while, you should give this one a try, because as you move around, you will definitely remember what that was like. And it's got a nice BL-T3 little splitter, so not bad. It's one of those IEMs that's priced about where it should be. This one was sent to me from the AK Audio store. You can see on Black Friday price, it's $11.66, and I think that was ballpark what the normal price was, maybe $12-ish. So thank you guys for shipping that one out to me. So what do you need to know about the T3? It is a single dynamic driver, bassy, leaning dark. It doesn't really have a whole lot. The treble is there, especially if you got a song that has a good amount of high frequency. It's kind of fine, but generally for pop music, it tended to be on the darker side for me. It's just kind of missing that kind of high-end sparkle life that I like to have, especially on a bassier dynamic driver. So there's sort of various versions of this IEM depending on what your playlist looks like. So I'll kind of run through a few of them. So normal pop music with a kind of a nice bassy beat to it. It's kind of a slower, bassier, that droning bass that you get when the bass isn't quite fast and it's a little bit too high. You get this constant drone throughout the whole song. Bassy songs will do that, and for me it got a bit fatiguing. So you might like that. For me, it just got a bit too fatiguing. Just they need to cut the bass down a little bit and speed it up a little bit. Mostly the level is kind of just persistent droning bass. Gets kind of annoying after a while. So if your playlist is mostly vocalists, if you like Adele's and Diana Krall, Tracy Chapman, those strong vocalist performances, it actually sounds really, really good. That whole midsection is actually quite nice. And if there's no droning bass in the background, it's much better. So that would be my suggestion, is if you're a bassier guy, maybe not the T3s. If you're primarily vocals, upper end instruments, something that doesn't have a whole lot of persistent bass to it, kind of fine. On the treble side, like I said, it's a bit dark, but if you feed it, a source that's actually upper end heavy, like I like a lot of EDM, Deadmau5, Skrillex, that kind of stuff that has a really big high-end component. There's a new one, Deadmau5's Bridged by a Light Wave, and that sounds actually really good, because instead of getting fatigued by a strong treble, annoying beat by Deadmau5, it actually is down a notch or two, and it sounds fine, and it's not fatiguing at all. But as you drop down, and as the synth kind of goes down in volume a little bit, then it'll get darker and harder to find, and it'll fall behind the vocals, and so you'll kind of deal with that. But yeah, feeding it kind of full-on Skrillex is actually not all that bad because of the level of treble to begin with, so not too bad there. So where things get kind of a little more confusing is when you mix all these together and you just have like your average song that has a vocalist and a bunch of instruments, and then it's a little bit confusing as to what's going to pop forward. Are the vocals going to pop forward, or is the bass going to stomp over the vocals? And if it's really treble, the treble will really kind of not really stomp over the vocals, but they will clearly make more of an appearance than what you'd find alone. So it's a little hard to pin down on that. Like, I wouldn't necessarily call it always dark and bassy. Sometimes those mids can actually sound more recessed, and a lot of that just depended on what else was going on in the song. So I sort of had a hard time coming up with a good description, but for the most part, this bassy dark is what you're really going to find. And to add to that kind of sound is the sound stage is very much between your ears, and it's this big ball of sound kind of right behind the vocals. And it's kind of a classic dynamic driver, slower, hard to pinpoint instruments behind the vocals type of sound. So, you know, I think similar complaints, not on the sound stage, but this congested dynamic driver sound, I think people said on the BL03, but the BL03 is, you know, a couple classes higher than the T3, but the T3 has kind of similar problems if you were really looking to have some really high quality instrument locations. Not quite there, but vocals, I think I would, if you're really into vocals and kind of quiet vocals at that, it's not bad. Everything else is a little more unknown as to what your musical preference is going to be and how it's going to sound on the T3, especially when all the instruments are playing at the same time and the vocals are either going to pop forward or backwards. So yeah, a little bit tough one to pin down. Sort of an interesting one. A couple people had asked about it. I was curious about it when the BL01 was announced and the driver was going to be the same material. You sort of assume that an $11 driver is going to be a little different than the newer one, but you remember the BL01 came out at, what, $16? So not that far. And from all that I've heard, the driver is not the same. So I do think it's a better quality driver than what was in the T3, and this is probably the same exact driver that was in the older BL01 that's been around for a while. So fear not that you're going to end up with a dark ball of sound. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and that was a quick look at the BLON T3, and thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.